Obviously, in the lead up to that, you had all this crap going on through the media and through the government about how they're going to change the Religious Freedom Bill and all this other stuff. So, of course, that's always in the back of your mind thinking, okay, how is this going to play out for us?
I think there was a level of intrigue as well. Like having a same-sex marriage, how are they going to do it? Are they going to walk down the aisle? Are they going to have people with them? How are they going to do a first dance? All this kind of stuff. There was a lot of intrigue in terms of traditional wedding and how it's going to kind of play out.
And that was probably our favourite conversation with you, was actually, how are we doing this? Like, what do you want? If you want to do the traditional wedding, I'll give you the traditional wedding. I think you said, that's not me, and I don't think that's you.
Unbridely is a community of pro-wedding vendors who believe in freedom and integrity in weddings, giving you options, solutions, tips and tricks to create the experience and memories that you and your fiancé really want and deserve. Because we believe that weddings are a team sport. With how-tos, stories and interviews with recently married couples, we find out what went right and what they'd change if they could go back and do it all over again. I'm Camille, and welcome to the Unbridely podcast. Hey, and thanks for joining me. In Australia, the right for any couple to get legally married has only been made possible in the last 5 years. So when a non-hetero couple start to plan their wedding, there's still some limiting beliefs circling about how they should go about it. Simon and Tim found, for example, that the level of intrigue about whether or not they were going to see each other before the ceremony, if they were going to have a wedding party, how the first dance was going to work was huge, if not a little bit disconcerting. So today I have a chat with them about how they went about finding their own wedding style, planning a celebration that felt personal and unique but true to them. We have a laugh about their epic ninja vows, how they used Xylo bands in their reception, and also discover the one big regret they have, the one thing that they really wish that they could have done. Now, I do want to make mention of the audio quality of Simon and Tim's track. They live in a very remote part of South Australia called Happy Valley, and unfortunately, the price for having a home in such an idyllic location is the strength of the internet signal, or lack thereof. But please enjoy, because I know their perspective and their stories are so worth you getting past them, sounding like they've dialed in from the 1950s. And you should also know that this episode is rated SS for super sweary. Let's jump right in. Hi, Tim. Hi, Simon. Welcome.
Hey, Cam.
Thank you so much for jumping on, chatting about your big day. I obviously know, because I had the privilege of being your celebrant, quite a bit about why you chose what you chose. That just before we started recording, I was saying that the way that you made decisions in your wedding planning, I think is going to be super empowering for other couples. So I'm going to ask you questions that I know the answer to, okay?
Cool.
Don't give them away.
I want to go back a little bit. Can you tell us just the shortest version of your engagement story?
Simon and I met each other in September of 2014. Long story short, we went to America in 2018. I had been alluding to wanting to get married to Simon because he was the man, and he told me if I proposed, he's not going to say yes.
We actually went shopping in Vegas.
Yeah.
And we're looking at rings. Tim's the kind of person where you can't keep any secrets from. So everything was completely out in the open. We went shopping and we bought a couple of rings that we really liked. And then after we bought the rings, it was kind of like, well, what does this mean? And then I kind of asked him when we were back in the hotel whether he wanted to marry me.
So he proposed. He actually asked me in our hotel room after he'd gone to the toilet. It was so romantic. So romantic. And then we kept it a secret from everybody. And we went out for dinner that night with a whole heap of friends. And I hid my hand until we were in Teo, where all the Kardashians go, and the lights hit it. And it was just like this glistening of diamonds. And she's screamed, "What is that?" And I said, "What do you think it is?" And she started crying. And then she screamed at the top of her lungs. And the whole place went silent. It was just like in the movies, you know how when somebody screams, everybody just goes, "Oh, my God, what's going on?" And she's like, "My best friend's just got engaged." And it was great.
So engaged in 2018, and did you dive straight into planning, or did you sit back a bit and go, what do we want?
Coming back from America, we kind of were like, okay, now we need to start saving again. I would have just gone out the next week and got married, but Simon's the bank manager. He's the rock. He's the no, you cannot spend.
This is how you balance each other, though.
Yeah. It took probably a good year and a bit. It was only when we started kind of really discussing where do you want to get married, what's your ideas, that we started to really get into the nuts and bolts of planning a wedding.
And did you pause at all, do you think, because you are a same-sex couple and, same-sex marriage was still pretty new in Australia at that point? Do you think there was any element of that you went, hang on a minute, how do we want to do it? Or did you just have the vision and once you had the money, of course, Simon, you just jumped in?
There was a little bit of hesitation, I think, initially, more so because it was just so fresh and so new, and we kind of didn't want to be the stereotypical, let's have a pride march down some street with all the floats. Literally, our straight friends are like, oh, so it's going to be like a Mardi Gras. I'm like, no, it's a marriage celebration. It's exactly what you guys have, except instead of a groom and a bride, it's two grooms, or in the case of a same-sex lesbian couple, two brides. Not, rocket science here.
Simon, maybe you can tell us, because you were the main planner, how many months were you planning for roughly?
So we initially were planning for about 9 months, but obviously due to COVID, we had to then postpone it. We're going to wait a little bit longer and we're going to do the day that we wanted to have. And it gave us extra time that we could save more money and we could have a bigger and brighter day. We added some additional things in that we didn't have on the original plan.
What were the things that you brought in when you had a chance to?
I think we ended up inviting an additional 20 or 30 people to the actual wedding itself. So it gave us the opportunity to save that little bit more money, that we could add more guests to the list. We had things like confetti cannons at the ceremony, some additional lighting.
Rather than dwell on the negative, let's go bigger and better and make this motherfucker a big, huge extravaganza, which is what we did.
Yes.
That's what we did.
And so what was the hardest part of wedding planning?
The hardest part was controlling the accelerator of the spending, whereas Tim has the imagination. He can just keep going and adding and adding and adding.
I will add, unless it was the Xylo bands, which were what Simon wanted. When I showed him, I'm like, we can get these. Oh, yeah, no. It doesn't matter how much they cost. We were going to get them.
Could you explain to people what the Xylo bands were?
So effectively, these are little LED bands that you put on your wrist. We had the remote, but effectively the likes of Taylor Swift, Coldplay, Ed Sheeran, Lady Gaga, all the big performers use these in their concert to give it a bit more oomph in the lighting department.
It was almost like a crowd participation thing, plus a lighting thing, plus a little bit of surprise and delight for your guests.
Yeah.
So how did you choose your venue?
Tim always wanted Serafino. There was accommodation attached to the venue, really good wine, really good food, a great event space, and a really good coordinator that we connected with as well.
They had what they called the winter wedding package, so because we were looking at getting married in winter. So from a budgeting perspective, it ticked many boxes for Simon. I'd been to many events there, so I knew what the capabilities of it were.
It sounds like it was a pretty easy decision too, because you loved it, a one-stop shop where you could get the event space, your ceremony space, your coordinator there, your food, your beverage, plus the other vendors as well, right? Photographer,
100%.
celebrant, flowers,
Cake.
cake. Would you recommend a package like that to other couples?
It definitely made it a lot easier. I've done events before where you have to then go out and meet vendors and then kind of get a feel for them and, costings, and that in itself not only takes up a lot of time, but then there's also trying to find the right person that fits with you.
Undoubtedly. And you've hit the nail on the head. All of the suppliers, of course, their reputation and ability and, their worthiness to be a part of your wedding is all wrapped up in the reputation of Serafino. So you did great. You saved a bucket load of time. Let's face facts. You've always been the planner and the organiser. And your fiancé's eyes glaze over a little when you start talking about the details of your wedding day. But you really need someone to share this all with, to bounce ideas off, and someone who's not going to ruin the surprises, but also be supportive and maybe even offer a different perspective. So when you're needing to get a second opinion about your bridesmaid, your in-laws, or your first dance song, Unbridely Couples is your safe space. Unbridely hosts a private Facebook community where modern engaged couples can share ideas, chat and solve problems, and generally just get freaking excited about their wedding. We also have a curated list of experienced wedding vendor professionals in there to offer suggestions and tips, insight into how to get the most out of your big day. But with no unsolicited DMs or pushy sales tactics, it's just not what Unbridely is about. So you can search for the Unbridely Couples group on Facebook or just click on the link in the show notes. I'll see you in there. When it came down to family and friends, were there any difficult conversations that you had to have?
In the lead up to all of this, obviously, my parents had struggled for a while with my sexuality. So there was a lot of having to get, bridges rebuilt and to try and slowly get back. One thing that did stand out at the end of that, we did like a mother-son dance, and everything that I've wanted to hear for years finally got said in this one moment with my mum. And there's photos of me, I look like I'm at a bloody funeral with the amount of tears coming out of my face. But it was just one of those moments that I'll never, ever forget. She was so immensely proud. She couldn't believe what we'd pulled off and what we'd done.
It was an amazing day where, whatever happened in the beginning was kind of put away.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter.
Was there anything that you felt uncomfortable asking your suppliers?
There was no funny business. Us being a same-sex couple, there was no kind of, sniggering.
There was no bakery saying, no, we're not going to make you cake. Obviously, in the lead up to that, you had all this crap going on through the media and through the government about how they're going to change the Religious Freedom Bill and all this other stuff. So, of course, that's always in the back of your mind thinking, okay, how is this going to play out for us?
I think there was a level of intrigue as well. Like having a same-sex marriage, how are they going to do it? Are they going to walk down the aisle? Are they going to have people with them? How are they going to do a first dance? All this kind of stuff. There was a lot of intrigue in terms of traditional wedding and how it's going to kind of play out.
And that was probably our favourite conversation with you, was actually, how are we doing this? Like, what do you want? If you want to do the traditional wedding, I'll give you the traditional wedding. I think you said, that's not me, and I don't think that's you.
You said, let's have fun with it.
I think there's a sense of freedom for same-sex couples in particular because there isn't a long history of custom, tradition, expectation. And so when it comes down to planning a wedding celebration for two guys or two girls or non-binary or whatever it may be, they just don't have that hanging over their head. So it's like, okay, white canvas, what do you want to do? What does it mean to you?
We literally had the best time doing it.
I'm guessing, Simon, you were the one with the calculator at the end. Are you willing to share what your budget was and what the reality was?
It wasn't too bad. I went into planning a wedding knowing it was going to be expensive. Original budget was about 25. I thought it was a reasonable amount to spend, but we ended up spending around about $42,000, which I don't think is too bad because we had the additional time frame that we were able to save the additional money. We invited additional people. We had the extra bling, so to speak.
And then on that, is there anything that you would take away? Like if you could go back, would you take anything off? Anything where you go, well, do you know what? Could have done without that.
Not really.
There's things that we should have done more of. The one thing I regret on the day is not having a videographer.
And it just came down to, we were very conscious because we actually were very blessed. We didn't go into debt at all for the wedding. Simon didn't want to have to refinance the home. He didn't want to have another credit card. He wanted to go into this and not have any debt. And that was going to be the one thing that would have pushed us over. And even though I think it was $3,500
extra,
and it's not much in the scheme of like a day like that, we both go, that is the one thing we wish we had, especially around the ceremony.
I think the feedback that we got based on our ceremony was really, really impressed with our ceremony, and they kept saying it's the best ceremony that we've ever been to and things like that. To hear that kind of feedback and not really see it from their perspective, you can't kind of redo that kind of chemistry or the electricity.
You woke up on the morning of your wedding. Tell us how you felt.
So I woke up
sick.
He woke up feeling sick.
I was a bit nervous.
We woke up real super early.
I woke up about 7 a.m.
No, I woke up earlier than that.
Did you?
I went for a walk. I watched the sunrise. I was just like a kid at Christmas.
Aww.
It was a mixture of nerves and excitement. It was kind of a bit of a roller coaster for me in the morning, but it ended up kind of calming down, and you could see the build up and, you know, family coming to see you and presents coming to the door and glasses of champagne and things like that. It was really cool.
And we were trying not to be pissed by the time we got down there.
Perhaps we should tell listeners as well, you both got ready together, didn't you?
We're best friends. Like, we do everything together. It didn't feel right for me to kind of go, well,
go stay with your mother.
It felt right for us to do it all together and experience it all together. So we, you know, spent the night together. We got ready together. We walked down the aisle together.
For something this monumental, you want your best friend there with you. And I guess to put it in more perspective for everybody listening, we didn't have a party at all.
So no wedding party, as in bridesmaids, groomsmen. Why did you choose not to have a wedding party?
We've got a lot of combined friends. So it was very hard to kind of make that decision as to who goes with me and who goes with Tim. We made a conscious decision right from the beginning that we were only just going to be us two.
From my perspective, it was like, we don't need anybody extra to validate our love. Everybody who's coming is already doing that. Everybody that was there was, in a way, part of our wedding party. So I don't need to have 3 or 4 people beside me to make sure my suit jacket's pulled down right.
What went really well?
Most of the day.
I think the day went really well from start to finish.
What was the rose ceremony? Because you weren't on The Bachelor. It wasn't, you don't get a rose. No, it was a different thing. Can you explain the ritual that you chose?
We wanted something specifically within our ceremony in regards to joining 2 families together. So Tim's family and my family. So we come across a rose ceremony, and theoretically what it is, one family has one coloured rose and the other family has another coloured rose. So all of Tim's family had the white rose and all of my family had the red rose. One by one, each member of our immediate family, so mum, dad, brother, you know, sister-in-law, nephew, niece, they'd pick a rose and then put it in a vase together. So it mixed the colours together, and that signified the families coming together as kind of, I guess, one bunch.
Anything funny or unusual happen on the day?
So when we sat down after we got into the reception, we did the lap of honour, did all what we needed to do. We were starving at this point because, as everybody told us, you won't have time to eat. So anyway, we sat down for entree, and I got the pork belly, and it had a pumpkin mash. As I cut into the pork belly fell off the fork and landed in the pumpkin mash, and then went 3 steps off the plate and on my white shirt. So that didn't go to script. So I still remember walking out the back where Joe's running service, and she's like, "What are you doing out here?" And I moved my napkin. I can't say the words that she said, but it went something like, "You can wait. You are not my priority right now. Stand over there and don't move." It was like being told off by my mum. It was great. So they managed to get all the pumpkin out. I came out and Simon's like, "Hey, you'd never know it was there."
If you could go back and do it all over again, because I know you'd love to, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?
I would probably focus on doing a little bit more in the ceremony in terms of staging it a bit more. We were in the what they call the barrel room. So we were surrounded by all the wine barrels. What could we add to it? And I always say to Matt from Venue Productions, if I could get some more lighting in there just to make it a little bit more lit up and look a bit more jazzed up, that would be the only thing I'd do differently.
I just thought it was the most amazing day, and it come together so perfectly. The only thing I probably would say, for me, it probably ended too quickly. Like it finished, it seemed like a click of things and it was done, whereas I would probably maybe draw it out a little bit longer. That's the only thing that I can think of, is just make it last a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's cool. So Simon and Tim, what's your biggest wedding planning tip for other engaged couples?
Listen to your partner. And I guess the one thing that made it easy for us, we actually communicated really, really well through the whole process of planning. I listened to what Simon would want, he'd listen to what I want. If we didn't agree, we'd then find a happy medium, or one of us would just keep bulldozing the other one until one of us gave in. Have that open communication where there is no right or wrong answer. I've said this to a couple of people who have then since started planning their own wedding. Plan for the most epic day and budget it, and then go, I don't want to spend that much money, and then go, what can we start removing? So you still have what you intended, but just a dulled down version of it if you're not willing to spend what that comes back at.
My advice would be to take your time. Make sure that you really think about what you're wanting to include on the day. Be creative. Make it a memorable day for yourself. Obviously, with the budget, you've got to compromise at some point, but try and have what you want to have, because the last thing you want to do is get to the end of it and go, well, I should have done this, and this. But tailor it to yourself. Tailor it to you as a couple. And that's what we did. And it was amazing.
Listen to your suppliers, because you had that one great idea and we listened and it was the best thing.
So much fun. But also I'm taken back to things like you had the rose ceremony, which symbolised your two families coming together. You had the ninja vows in your ceremony. You had walking in together with your dog Malibu. You had Xylo bands. You had a beautiful rainbow drip cake. You had, the confetti cannon during the ceremony, fireworks during reception, and your monogram.
The monogram, the LED
light.
The neon.
Yeah, can you explain to the listeners this light that you had commissioned?
So I stole this idea off of Jared and Michael, who are the Real House Dads of Melbourne. I think that's their Instagram handle. So they got married in 2019, I think it was, and their wedding coordinator had their initials done into a monogram. So I'm like, that's a great idea. So I'm like, I showed Simon, and all he did was just eye roll. He's like, yep, this is going to cost. I would then try to find T&Ss in all sorts of different variations and how it would look. I finally found the one that we settled on. Then I sent it to a company in Melbourne called the Neon Collective, who are now, they've been rebranded. And I said, I want to turn this into a neon light for my wedding. I want it this big by this big. I want it in this colour. And they came back with the quote. And it was actually cheaper than I thought. We paid $1,200 for it. A lot of people go, it's $1,200 for a light. That was the statement piece that hung at the back of our reception behind the cake, and was on the whole reception, and it just stood out. It was on everything. All the stationery.
We put Bonbonnieries.
Bonbonnieries had it. The Xylo bands had it.
The nameplates had it.
Everything.
I found that just having that monogram, it really helped you to tie everything together as well. You kept coming back to it in almost every element of your wedding. Tim and Simon, what was your favourite part of your wedding day, that moment that you will never forget?
The two, both are actually from the ceremony. That initial, I remember standing on the other side of the door in the tasting room, and I could hear the song, and then I could hear you introduce us. That roar from everybody. It's just something that I think about it, and it just does something in your soul, because there's just 100+ people screaming for your happiness and your love. And then walking in there and then going, fuck, I've got a dog, fuck, oh, shit. And I'm trying to reassure her as we're walking down the aisle. So I don't know if you saw, I'm looking down at her, trying to look up, look down at her, going, it's okay, you're okay. Because as soon as everybody started screaming, she was like, oh, my God, where am I? What's going on? But she handled it, thankfully. And my second one was obviously the Ninja Vows.
So, Tim, for those who don't know what Ninja Vows are, can you explain what we did?
Cam gave us this suggestion that we write a vow for each other from the perspective of each other. It scared the shit out of Simon.
I was so anxious about the Ninja Vows.
I always remembered you saying to us, don't stress, because if one of you's written something that's either too soppy or serious and the other's gone down the comedic path, I'll tell you, and then you can figure out which way you want to go and we'll balance it out. And the hardest part was I went first. You gave me the card to read, and I remember reading it and glancing real quick, and I looked up at Simon and just whispered to him and said, you're fucked. You are absolutely fucked. So mine said, Simon, I promise to tone down my need to constantly scare the shit out of you, recording your response and posting it on social media for my amusement. Now, I have done that.
Oh, congrats.
To a degree.
Congrats. To a degree. Oh, Tim.
To a degree. I still scare him, but I don't record it anymore. It's fun. It then goes on to say, I also promise to respect your dislike for Mariah Carey and never play her rubbish again, especially at Christmas. At which point, everybody who knows us very well was laughing, going, yeah, that's never going to happen, but good try, Simon.
And then what you wrote to me was, as David said to Patrick in Schitt's Creek, you are my Mariah Carey. I too say those words to you today. You are my Mariah Carey. I promise to only ever let you be the diva in our relationship. I promise that I won't roll my eyes when you buy expensive things.
Remember that.
And I promise to let you play Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas Is You, at a favourite time of year, maybe only once. I promise that I will not complain, but watch you with love in my eyes. I make no promises to keep this vow, but I do promise I love you. So pretty much the Ninja Vows kind of cancel each other out.
As you always said, yin and yang.
Can you remember the laugh that you got? It was so much fun. You both wrote them individually. You didn't know what the other had written. But to me, that says you're on the same page. You know, you're on the same page in your relationship. You share a very similar sense of humour and you express yourself in a similar way to each other. That little shit stirring is, I don't know, I think that's the definition of marriage. Thank you so much, Tim and Simon. It's been so good to relive your wedding day, and thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
That about wraps it up for this episode of the Unbridely podcast. For the links and resources we mentioned, please head to the show notes. And if you love the show, please review and subscribe on the podcast platform you're on now so you don't miss out on a single episode. Thanks so much for listening, and remember, weddings are a team sport. Catch you soon.